How's it, my Orchids and Fynbos friends, and welcome to another CareCollab video. Today we're going to be talking about the amazing Angraecum sesquipedale orchids. I have two of these African species in my collection and I can't wait to talk about them. So stay tuned to find out more about these epic species. I'll display a list of the participating channels on the screen right now. So the CareCollab videos are run by Nina from Ninja Orchids, and it brings together growers from around the world to talk about their experience and tips on growing orchids in their unique environment. The CareCollab videos are open to anyone, and if you would like to get involved, check the information below. So these are my two Angraecum sesquipedale orchids. This one I received a few months back from Planté, and I've been holding off on repotting it. I'll be repotting this orchid with you in just a few moments. The other Angraecum is a replacement for this plant that I've had in my collection for a number of years, but unfortunately got crown rot at the end of last year. It's now put out a keiki about a month or so back, but these orchids are very, very slow growers, so I had to get a second plant. Angraecum sesquipedale is a famous orchid species that is native to the lowland forests of Madagascar. It's also known as Darwin's Comet Orchid, and it has large, star-like waxy flowers which are nighttime scented. What makes this orchid so famous is that Darwin saw the long spur of the flowers and hypothesized that a pollinator with an equally large proboscis had to exist that could pollinate this orchid. The orchid's name sesquipedale is actually Latin, which translates to 1.5 feet. Now the spurs of the flower are not that long, but they are one of the largest in the floral kingdom and can reach up to 30 centimeters in length. In the 1990s, it was finally proven that a hawk moth was responsible for the pollination of these orchids. On our recent trip to a flower show in the garden route, we got some amazing pictures of this orchid in flower, and I'll insert those now for you. In terms of general care, these orchids don't require very high light, so lower than Cattleya light. You're probably looking at around Miltoniopsis type of light or dappled light. I grow these orchids in my greenhouse in bright shade, and that seems to do perfectly fine for them. Where the orchids are positioned, in spring and summer they receive early morning dappled sunlight. When it comes to watering, they receive even water throughout the year. Depending on your potting mix, obviously you would need to adjust your watering schedule. In terms of fertilizer, as with all my orchids, I just do weekly. I have heard that steady fertilizer for these orchids is pretty essential if you want them to have nice large blooms that are strongly scented at night. Then on the potting mix, for this orchid, I've used plain cocoa chunks inside a netted pot. I don't find that they need the addition of sphagnum moss or perlite because they like to have a lot of aeration around their roots, and I've preferred to place it in a netted pot. With this one that I'm going to repot for you in a moment, I'm going to place it in a pot, not in a basket, and instead of cocoa chunks, because I think it's going to be too water retentive for that orchid, I'm going to deviate slightly from my standard potting mix, and I'm going to go to plain orchid bark with a bit of charcoal. This is not sponsored at all, but there's a mix by this company called CareCollab, which I like. In order to ensure the orchid stays a little bit more hydrated, I'm going to break the bark up into smaller chunks, so I'm going to go for something along a medium-sized bark. So let's get into the repotting. So I'm going to be repotting the orchid into this specific pot. It's a little bit larger than I need, but I think it will do okay. So let's start by removing the orchid from its current mix. Okay, so I generally don't remove much of the damaged roots if I can, especially when it comes to Vandaceous types or Angraecums. I think I'm only going to remove some of the bottom dead roots over here. So I'll start with that one. That one. And that one. I'm not really going to remove anything more than that. I think everything else is pretty fine. These roots over here will remain outside of the pot. This ball will go into the pot, and let's see how we do with that. Throw some of the mix in the bottom. Take the orchid. Now, one thing that's important is obviously these couple of roots over here were aerial roots, so I'm not going to put them into the pot. Ideally, I would have wanted to wait for new root growth before I repotted, but I needed to change this and get it into its new setup. One thing to bear in mind is that roots will not adapt to a new media. In this case, this media isn't too different from the old media, so I'm not that stressed. But if I was going to go for something completely different, then I would have to be pretty careful, and I would have to wait for new root growth. Otherwise, I would just kill all the roots. And similar process for the aerial roots. You can't stick the aerial roots inside the pot now because they will not adapt to those conditions. So any of the roots that were originally aerial roots, you want to try and keep them outside the pot. Just going to put a few more bits on top like this. And the orchid is pretty stable, so I don't need to stake it or anything. There's the finished repotted orchid. Lastly, we don't want to forget to add the tag in, so let's just do that so we know what plant it is. And there we have it, a freshly potted Angraecum sesquipedale orchid. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more content such as this. And please check out the other channels. I'm sure we're going to see some amazing Angraecum sesquipedale orchids, and maybe even some in flower. Keep well, stay safe guys. Bye.